Across the English Channel, the United Kingdom offers another distinct pillar of European wealth: financial services. Even post-Brexit, London remains a titan of global finance. The UK economy transitioned away from heavy industry much earlier than its continental peers. Instead, it capitalized on deregulation, English common law, and a strategic time zone to build an unparalleled hub for banking, insurance, and asset management. Financial services contribute massively to the UK's gross domestic product, driving high-wage employment and international investment. However, relying so heavily on finance creates structural imbalances. The prosperity generated in London often fails to reach post-industrial regions in the north, creating stark economic inequalities. Furthermore, as the UK navigates its new reality outside the European Union, it faces the immense challenge of maintaining regulatory equivalence and retaining its crown against rising financial centers in Paris and Frankfurt.
At the heart of this regional power is the European single market. Representing over 450 million consumers, it is one of the largest unified economic zones in the world. The true power of the single market lies in its regulatory standardization. When a product is approved in one member state, it can be seamlessly sold across the entire bloc. This eliminates enormous friction for businesses, reducing costs and accelerating innovation. For multinational corporations, Europe becomes a single, highly lucrative target rather than 27 fragmented markets. Furthermore, the introduction of the euro minimized currency exchange risks, effectively turbocharging cross-border trade and investment. However, this integration also demands strict adherence to fiscal rules and regulations, creating tension between national sovereignty and collective economic stability. It is a delicate balancing act that continually tests the political resilience of the European Union.
The greatest systemic threat to this economic model is not external, but internal: demographics. Europe is rapidly aging. The combination of rising life expectancy and sharply falling birth rates is radically altering the population pyramid. Fewer young people are entering the workforce just as a massive generation enters retirement. This creates a severe dependency ratio imbalance. Economically, an aging population means a shrinking labor force, which intrinsically limits potential GDP growth. It also means skyrocketing healthcare and pension costs, placing an enormous escalating burden on public finances. Governments are faced with mathematically unforgiving choices: raise the retirement age, increase already high taxes, or cut welfare benefits. While targeted immigration can partially offset labor shortages, it often brings intense political friction. Navigating this demographic winter is arguably the most complex structural challenge European policymakers will face over the next 3 decades.
The expansion of the European Union into Eastern Europe fundamentally transformed the continent's economic geography. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic rapidly integrated into Western supply chains. They offered a highly educated workforce and competitive labor costs right on the doorstep of the German industrial engine. This integration was a masterstroke for European competitiveness. Western firms relocated manufacturing, boosting corporate margins, while Eastern European nations experienced dramatic improvements in infrastructure, wages, and living standards. Today, these economies are evolving past basic assembly. They are climbing the value chain, developing robust technology sectors, and fostering homegrown innovation hubs. However, this rapid convergence now faces a turning point. As wages rise and labor shortages emerge, Eastern Europe must transition from an efficiency-driven model to an innovation-led economy to sustain its impressive growth trajectory.
Europe is home to some of the wealthiest, most advanced societies on the planet. But this prosperity is not guaranteed. Behind the postcard-perfect cities and high living standards lies a continent facing deep structural challenges. For decades, Europe built a formidable economic machine, powered by high-end manufacturing, seamless regional trade, deep financial markets, and expansive welfare systems. It promised a unique social contract, economic growth paired with profound social security. Yet today, the foundational pillars of this system are shaking. From shifting global alliances to an unprecedented energy transition, Europe's economy is at a critical inflection point. In this documentary, we deconstruct the European economic model. We will explore how it generated immense wealth, the localized engines that drive it forward, and the vulnerabilities that threaten its future. Can Europe preserve its prosperity in an increasingly unstable world?
No discussion of the European economy is complete with examining its central industrial engine, Germany. Germany's economic model is heavily predicated on high-value manufacturing and export dominance. Specializing in automobiles, machinery, and chemical products, the German Mittelstand, a network of highly specialized, medium-sized enterprises, forms the backbone of this powerhouse. These companies dominate global niche markets, ensuring a steady inflow of foreign capital. For decades, Germany leveraged cheap imported energy and unhindered access to global markets, particularly in Asia, to fuel its factories. This generated massive trade surpluses, anchoring the broader European economy and providing stability to the Eurozone. Yet, this heavy reliance on exports and external energy sources also reveals a distinct vulnerability. When global supply chains fracture or geopolitical tensions rise, the German industrial machine is immediately exposed to severe external shocks, threatening regional growth.
For decades, the European economic calculation benefited from a massive hidden subsidy, security guaranteed by the United States. By relying on the NATO umbrella, European governments safely redirected billions of euros away from military spending and into domestic welfare and infrastructure programs. The return of conventional war to the European continent has shattered this post-Cold War illusion. Today, European nations are being forced to rapidly and dramatically increase their defense budgets. Rebuilding neglected military-industrial complexes and replenishing depleted stockpiles requires monumental capital investment. This is capital that can no longer be used for technological innovation or social safety nets. The urgent need to construct an autonomous, robust defense capability represents a massive structural shift in government expenditure. It demands a recalibration of national budgets, fundamentally altering the economic priorities of the European Union in an increasingly hostile, multipolar world.
In southern Europe, Italy presents a fascinating paradox of immense wealth and persistent stagnation. Italy is Europe's second-largest manufacturing power. Its strength lies in regional industrial districts, where thousands of small and medium-sized family-owned enterprises collaborate intensely. These clusters produce world-class textiles, machinery, and luxury goods, driving a highly successful export economy in the northern regions. Yet, the Italian model is bifurcated. A deep economic divide separates the prosperous, industrialized north from the historically underdeveloped south. Furthermore, Italy has struggled with chronically slow macroeconomic growth for over 2 decades. High public debt, inefficient bureaucracy, and a rapidly aging population stifle innovation and productivity growth. The challenge for Italy is to modernize its administrative state and unleash the potential of its highly skilled but often constrained private sector to prevent further decline relative to its northern neighbors.
Moving west, we encounter a very different economic philosophy in France. Unlike Germany's decentralized industrial base, France operates on a model of strategic state intervention, known as dirigisme. The French government actively champions national industries, heavily subsidizing sectors deemed vital for sovereign independence, such as aerospace, defense, and energy. A prime example is France's massive investment in nuclear power, which currently supplies the majority of its electricity. This strategic foresight has granted France a unique degree of energy independence and lower carbon emissions compared to its neighbors. Additionally, France boasts global giants in luxury goods and agriculture, providing robust, high-margin export revenues. However, this heavy state involvement comes at a cost. France grapples with high public spending, rigid labor markets, and substantial taxation. Balancing state protectionism with the need for global competitiveness remains France's primary, ongoing economic challenge.
Another critical vulnerability lies in Europe's fundamental energy architecture. Historically, European industrial competitiveness relied heavily on importing vast quantities of cheap, reliable fossil fuels, primarily from Russia and the Middle East. Recent geopolitical shocks have violently exposed the extreme fragility of this dependency. When supply chains are weaponized, Europe faces immediate industrial paralysis and crippling inflation.
In response, the continent is accelerating an unprecedented energy transition, aiming to become the first climate-neutral continent. Massive investments are flowing into wind, solar, and hydrogen infrastructure. However, this transition is highly capital-intensive and fraught with logistical complexities. Intermittent renewable sources require massive grid upgrades and advanced battery storage to guarantee baseload power for heavy industry. Until this green infrastructure is fully realized, Europe remains awkwardly caught in a transitional phase, grappling with structurally higher energy costs that directly undermine its global manufacturing competitiveness.
Compounding these challenges is the persistent specter of slow economic growth and high sovereign debt. Following the 2008 financial crisis, Europe's recovery consistently lagged behind that of the United States. Structural rigidities, fragmented capital markets, and a general risk aversion in corporate culture have hindered the development of a dominant tech sector. While America produced tech behemoths that drive modern equity markets, Europe struggled to scale its own digital champions. Simultaneously, several southern European states remain burdened by staggering levels of public debt, limiting their fiscal maneuverability during crises. This combination of sluggish productivity and heavy debt loads creates a dangerous cycle. It deters foreign direct investment and limits the capital available for domestic research and development. Without comprehensive structural reforms to unleash venture capital and streamline market regulations, Europe risks falling further behind in the global technological race.
Tying these diverse national economies together is the shared ethos of the European social model. Unlike the more market-driven approach of the United States, Europe prioritizes comprehensive welfare. Across the continent, citizens enjoy universal healthcare, generous unemployment benefits, expensive paid leave, and state-funded higher education. This system successfully mitigates extreme poverty and fosters highly stable, cohesive societies. It is considered a core achievement of modern European civilization. But this social contract is expensive. It requires high levels of taxation and significant redistribution of wealth, which can sometimes suppress entrepreneurial risk-taking and rapid capital accumulation. The fundamental economic equation requires continuous, robust productivity growth to generate the tax revenues necessary to fund these extensive public services. When growth stagnates, the financial viability of this cherished welfare state comes under immediate, severe pressure, sparking fierce political debate over necessary reforms. The European economic model stands at a critical historical crossroads. The continent remains a powerhouse of human capital, advanced manufacturing, and enviable social stability. Its capacity for coordinated supranational action remains totally unique in global history. Yet, the foundational assumptions of the past, cheap imported energy, outsourced security, and unquestioned export dominance, no longer hold true. To preserve its high living standards, Europe must execute a complex structural pivot. It must radically enhance its technological sovereignty, accelerate the green energy transition, militarize its defense capabilities, and dismantle internal barriers to capital and innovation. This requires profound political courage and a willingness to reform deeply entrenched systems. The coming decade will determine whether the European economy gently stagnates into a lucrative but fading museum or reinvents itself as a resilient, innovative titan capable of leading the 21st century global economy. In the broader geopolitical arena, Europe finds itself squeezed between two massive, increasingly adversarial economic superpowers. The United States and China are engaged in a fierce technological and industrial rivalry, heavily utilizing state subsidies and protectionist policies. China's dominance in green technologies, such as solar panels and electric vehicles, poses a direct threat to Europe's automotive and manufacturing sectors. Meanwhile, aggressive U.S. industrial policies, like the Inflation Reduction Act, are attracting vital European capital and green manufacturing jobs across the Atlantic. Europe, traditionally the champion of free trade and open markets, must urgently adapt to this new era of geoeconomics. It must develop its own robust industrial strategy, securing critical raw materials and protecting domestic industries without sparking a mutually destructive trade war. Navigating this superpower rivalry while maintaining internal market cohesion is a test of supreme diplomatic and economic agility.
To understand Europe today, we must look at the ashes of the mid-20th century. Following devastating conflicts, European nations made a pragmatic, transformative decision to bind their economies together so tightly that war would become materially impossible. This was the genesis of the European economic project. Through the European Coal and Steel Community and later the European Economic Community, borders were effectively dissolved for trade. This allowed capital, goods, services, and labor to flow with unprecedented freedom. The result was an economic miracle. Nations that previously engaged in destructive competition transitioned into a highly integrated supply chain. Wealth began to compound, enabling governments to invest heavily in public infrastructure, education, and healthcare. By creating a massive, unified consumer market, Europe attracted global investment, setting the stage for decades of robust, uninterrupted economic expansion and the birth of the modern European state.